Okay, thank you for joining us today. This is the series, Cybersecurity and Medical Devices, a practical advice for FDA's 510(k) requirements. And today's webinar, Security Architecture Views that the FDA expects and how to get them right. Today's webinar is from ICS and BG Networks. ICS supports its customers with custom software, user experience design, platform, and regulatory support to rapidly deliver next-generation medical devices.
And BG Networks, we're a company that makes automation tools, and we have an AI automated threat and risk analysis software that really makes your FDA submissions and MDR submissions a whole lot easier.
Fantastic. Before we jump into content, if I could just jump in and say hello, I'm Rachel Robinson from MassMedic, and give everyone just a second to jump on. But thank you so much, Milton and Colin, for introducing your organizations. We're incredibly excited to welcome you all to this webinar. This is a series addressing, as Milton said, challenging topics. And this includes a previous session on threat modeling and risk analysis that the group did with MassMedic. So we encourage you to take a look at past webinars as well. But I think we're good to get started with content. I think folks have joined and are getting situated. Just a few little housekeeping things. If you have questions, we strongly encourage it. Please put those in the Q&A box. It's usually at the bottom or the side of your screen, depending on if you're signing in on a mobile device or your desktop. So Milton, I'm going to kick it back over to you. Thanks for letting me jump in for a second.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you. All right. Yes, I'm Milton Narberry. I'm the Director of Medical Programs and Cybersecurity at ICS, based out of the Boston area.
And my name's Colin Duggan. I'm a co-founder and CEO of BG Networks. My email address is on there. We'll be referring to some of the other webinars and maybe other information. And if any of this might be interesting to you, feel free to email me and request this information will be referenced. Great. So, and directly related to that is this series on medical device webinars that we've been doing for about a year and a half now. Today is architectural views, and these are part of the eSTAR submission documents that the FDA expects. There are 4 views that we'll go over today, which are the 4 recommended views that the FDA has. And it is very complementary to the webinars that we've done in the past. For instance, we did a threat and risk assessment, threat modeling and risk assessment webinar you can see on the upper right back in April with MassMedic. And in this series now, we actually have quite a bit of the FDA's guidance covered. And so if you're new to the cybersecurity aspects of submissions for FDA, there's a lot of content on here now, and we'll continue to develop this content. The kind of genesis to this webinar was, we were looking for some examples out in the web for the FDA's architectural views, and we couldn't find any. So we decided that we'd create them and make them available generally, and that was the reason for this webinar. And we think, we have very complete views here. We've gotten feedback on these security views. These examples will show you, and we think they're actually, it's a fictional device we're going to use as an example, but we think these would be good submissions to the FDA. They're very complete.
And a reminder from our webinar in June, the latest FDA guidance, which came out June 2025. And if you've been paying attention to the evolution here, it's worth mentioning that this last iteration in June was basically sort of Section 7, mostly the same, with some further clarifications, but basically this is just weaving in 524B into the guidance more concretely within the actual document itself. So that's if you've been paying attention to the progression, the last one wasn't all that substantial, but it sort of cemented some ideas around the source of the regulation. And yeah, as Colin mentioned, so for a full set of slides which summarizes the changes, please just email us and we'd be happy to share that.
All right, we've got a poll question, and we'll ask this question now, and we'll do it at the end. The reason we do that is we think it makes things a little bit more interesting, and Milton and I get to grade ourselves. Like I said just before the call, Milton usually gets an A. Me not so good, but I'll do my best here. And this is a question that we selected also because, and please go ahead and answer the poll as I'm talking here, because we asked this question actually about a year ago, and we're going to get a chance to compare the answers to a year ago. And we can get kind of a little bit of a sense is, how is the industry doing overall in terms of getting prepared for FDA submissions and the processes that are in organizations to support FDA submissions. And the question is how well do you think those processes are leading to results and submissions that are going to meet the FDA's expectations? So our goal today is to take people from these lower categories, not confident, slightly confident, and hopefully move the group, over one, so to speak. So we'll hopefully get the distribution, to the good part of the curve here. So maybe we could see the results and we'll just comment on them quickly. Rachel, I'm not seeing the results. Do I need to?
Absolutely. So they should be right if you pull the button on the bottom of the screen, but if not, I will go ahead and hit share results again so folks can see those.
I got it now.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to copy this quickly so we have it at the end. Yeah, so this is actually a better distribution than last year, I can see already. We had more last year that were in the two lower buckets. So good to see that we have a lot of people now in the confident, somewhat confident and confident range. Extremely confident is about the same as last year. So hopefully, again, we'll get people out of those a little bit more out of the not confident and slightly confident into the better levels there. So.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to set the stage for the example that Colin is going to expand on by sort of level setting the context of the architectural views for those not completely familiar with them. And I'll start with sort of the what, why, and how for the views. If you're familiar with the cybersecurity standards, it's worth noting that the architectural views aren't really emphasized in standards like SW96, 81005, 5-1, or TIR 57. The FDA guidance is the strongest voice on the architecture. The guidance has sort of two main sections on this. The first makes the case for architectural ownership by the manufacturer. It covers the views used for design, development, and maintenance. The depth and scope of the views should scale with the system complexity and risk of device, as is normal for risk management. I found when I went back and looked at the actual wording, I always think of this as, well, you're just supposed to do for architectural views, but really what they say is, at a minimum, the following types of reviews are at a minimum are recommended. And then the second section, which is Appendix 2, elaborates more on expectations around submission documentation. The four architectural view types, of course, are global system view, multi-patient harm view, updatability, patchability view, and security use case views. So that was the what, moving from the what to the why. So Why create these views? Well, at 524B says that the manufacturer is responsible for cybersecurity, which means that you must implement cybersecurity controls in order to achieve the security. These controls come from analysis, and analysis implies basically a context and boundaries for that. So the quote from the guidance is the manufacturer should analyze the entire system to understand the full environment and context in which the device is expected to operate. Another section that I just paraphrase is that the FDA wants the manufacturer, the submission to provide to the FDA security context and trust boundaries, interfaces, interconnections, interactions that the medical device has with external entities, such that the FDA can evaluate the adequacy of the architecture. So the simple answer is, why do we need these architectural views? Because the manufacturer needs the views to be competent in their analysis, and the FDA needs the views so they can evaluate the efficacy of the solution. So it's kind of a straightforward relationship. Then moving from why to how for these views, I pulled like various sections from the guidance, and I was looking for a way to either summarize or make memorable. I tried, a word cloud, and while its results were interesting, I fell back on, just customized description here of things that I thought were consistent or important in the language from the guidance. And that's really a few ideas of, like, basically they want abundant descriptions. They want specialized diagrams for every scenario. They expect the manufacturer to assume a scope that exceeds the device, goes out into the environment or the system that the device works in. They're interested not just, externalities, but across and through elements. One should consider handoffs, lateral effects modes. And then lastly, this isn't mentioned repeatedly, but I think it's important. Basically, describe how the device reacts to attacks. This is your chance to sort of almost boast about your product. Given the what, why, and how, I think it's useful to sort of see how the architectural views are used in the secure product development framework, which, if you're familiar with the guidance, you're aware that that's sort of a front and center piece of how the FDA wants the manufacturer to execute. And to aid that, I preface that with a couple of observations. One is that, in response to the question, so where are the architecture views produced and consumed within the SPDF? One notion is that, the threat model, which really feeds the views, has this expansive list of areas that it's meant to contain. So supply chain, manufacturing, deployment, interoperation, maintenance, and decommissioning. And this is from section VA1. Also, architecture views are part of the process for design, development, maintenance. So that's where they're consumed. This slide is one that I've used in the past and in our series to kind of lay out how the secure product development framework runs alongside traditional design controls, with the SPDF in blue, design controls in gray. Answering the question of where the architectural views appear in the process in another way, consider where these views are sort of created, used, and maintained. So it's created basically by the risk management process. Your threat modeling risk assessment creates the architectural views, which results in specifications that then get treated as part of the larger whole. The architectural views are used by development in creating their solutions, so code and binaries, and they're maintained post-release of the product into the market through your systems that you monitor periodically to see if there have been new vulnerabilities discovered. It's also worth mentioning that there's some of the testing that you do that also isn't a one and done. There is some expectation for repeat and periodic retesting. these can also surface vulnerabilities. As we know, cybersecurity is an evolving situation. So that can create a need to update these views. So architectural views, not 4, but 4+, and multiple views per, or multiple scenarios that you have to analyze for each view. So I kind of wanted to revisit a point from the beginning of my slides where I mentioned, say, the depth and scope of the views scale with system complexity and risk of the device. Fairly sort of, it's easy to understand that. But so the architectural views are based on threat modeling, and the number and depth of the architecture views is really dependent upon the attack surface that's identified in the threat modeling. The threat modeling methods can be top-down or bottom-up. Top-down might be, say, threat actor-based, and bottom-up might be asset-based. They encourage using more than one method because used together, they get better coverage. And while that is always kind of a so it's a good thing, but where's the hurdle, and what do I need to do to get over it? But in this case, I'd argue that by using more than one view, you can actually sort of reduce your workload. By using two views, top down and bottom up, you get sort of you address the outliers, whether those were outliers in terms of risks that you didn't really think you needed to mitigate, or the opposite, risks that weren't being identified. So I'd argue that you at the end get a more relevant set of threats and solutions by using multiple models. So so that's that first section that we spoke of from the guidance. Now I'm going to shift to Appendix 2. So this is basically what's in the submission, and the short answer is basically diagrams and details. So detailed diagrams supporting explanatory text that identifies all assets, including, and of course, device hardware itself is obvious, application hardware or other supporting assets that directly interact with the targeted device is, very, very intuitive, but also healthcare facility operated assets. So the environment that it's going into, and of course, communications and networking assets. So if you're leaving the hospital environment and going remote, and then of course, well, not of course, something that's often looked is manufacturer controlled assets, including servers that interact with external entities. So any, what I used to think of as back office systems receiving the data that are low risk and normally not thought of as part of the product, but that now should also be considered. All right, so how detailed? In answering that, I point out direct language in the guidance that is asking for details. So, quote, this should include detailed diagrams, traces for all communication paths as described below. The following details should be provided. And then there's this wording that is, in my mind, sort of really brings a combinatorial challenge to the equation. For every communication path that exists between any two assets, including indirect connections, where there's is at least one intermediate asset. They're looking for these 19 details described in Appendix 2. So here are the 19 details, and I'm not going to go through these. I have actually shortened them so that they're manageable on a slide. But there are a few themes as I was going through this that I thought were worth sort of pointing out. So again, for every communication path between two assets, these start with the obvious things like communication interfaces and paths, type of data, and then it goes into some deeper detail, protocol names, version numbers, ports, frequencies, and then it goes into sort of overlooked areas is what I would call them. So detailed description for assets, including not currently used or enabled. So if you have some chips, FPGAs, libraries, and you're not using that functionality, that's still obviously, a threat within the system or a vulnerability within the system that threats can access. Other overlooked areas, handoff sequences. So you might have communication that goes through different elements and changes the medium of communication, but how are those messages handed off? Are there credentials around them? That sort of thing. And then also connection termination. So unusual circumstances where a connection is terminated, is the system still secure, or is that a change in behavior that can be exploited? Then it gets into sort of precision and detail, which is about credentials, sessions, hazards and controls, and testing and documenting that. And then there's a couple items that are, to me, a little bit vague, and such as enumeration evidence for justifying security claims. And so how are those enumerated and how are they traced and that sort of thing. So the point is that there's quite a bit here, and that when done for every 2 assets that communicate directly or indirectly, it's a heavy lift. So how do we get to a practical approach for Appendix 2? And I'm comfortable delivering conflicting messages. So here we go. The FDA guidance for architecture is burdensome, but in order to design, develop, test effectively, much of the baseline is necessary. Otherwise, you're kind of blowing smoke. So, and the standard for compliance is mixed. So some people have experience. Some of our clients have experience with they didn't find the reviewer very challenging to their assertions, and other ones where the challenge was strong, immediate, and expansive. So there's some variability of reviewer that is part of your risk equation there. And then comparative compliance, as I call it, using the metaphor of outrunning the bear. If you look good in comparison to other submissions, then there's they have to make priority choices as well. So your compliance, going back to how deep to go, practical approach. So your compliance should be based on the risk, and not just the security product risk, but also the risk that your particular company can handle around the submission. If 1 or 2 rounds is normal in terms of a 510K and rounds of communication with the FDA, it can go beyond that. And, it's a valid question to say, do you have to nail this in 1 or 2, or if it goes into 3 or 4, do you have the capacity for that? And even if you do have the capacity, there is the 180-day rule, at the end of which the FDA, if they don't have their questions answered, they're likely to reject the application. So with replies taking 30 to 60 days, and the possibility in those replies to have new information, you should be aware of the reset on the 180 days that can happen. If the FDA has open questions, they feel they've been given new information, they can reset the 180 days. So instead of a 6-month turnaround, you're talking about like a 12-month turnaround. So you do the homework, which is the analysis. You construct your collateral, which is explaining it which explains it to the FDA, and then anticipate defending your argument. And with that context for the architectural views, I'll turn it over to Colin, who will go into some sort of meaty detail about an AMPS example. And with that, Colin.
Great. Thanks, Milton. I'm just going to share here. I need this screen, which I'll share. Milton, can you see this okay?
I can. Yep.
Okay, great. Great. And before I jump in here, there was some questions. If you want the links to the previous webinars we've done, just send me an email. We'd be happy to share. If you want the slides from this presentation, just also let us know. The recording for this presentation will be sent to you, so you'll have that automatically. And but we'd be happy to present or provide the slides also. There's also a question, interesting question about were we going to cover the AI guidance that the FDA released in January. It's draft guidance, so it's not final. They're taking comments right now on it. And there is some aspects of diagramming around your AI architecture that's talked about there. We're not going to cover that in this webinar. We're thinking about a future webinar that would go through AI related cybersecurity, that guidance, and general advice. What I'll say now about AI is it has to be treated differently because of the nature of AI, because the attacks are different. So that's just something to keep in mind. It is not your kind of normal software, and there should be a different set of rules for any AI based software that you're adding in your device. Just now switching back here, I think that the advice that Milton gave is fantastic. You read that first section that Milton was talking about, and you're like, wow, okay, this is not so bad. Then you hit that appendix, and man, if you have to go through every one of those, and if you tried to meet every item of that appendix for like every asset and every communication path that Milton was talking about, it is a huge amount of work. I'd say what we're going to show here in the diagram, the feedback has been that this is very complete. So this would be towards the side of the spectrum of, if you have low tolerance for questions back from the FDA, you're trying to nail it first time, and that's really important. I think you'll see that we've got a lot of detail in the 4 architectural diagrams that we're going to show here. It maybe less would be appropriate. I'm not sure that a whole lot more than this would be appropriate. So just some perspective there on the level of complexity and detail we're going to show here. We have a lot of animation because the diagrams are fairly complex. And I'm going to start with the global system view. And we do have an AI AMPS example. We're not, again, going into the draft guidance, but we're just talking about that as a potential threat. And this first page, we lump into the first view, the global system view, but we like to give an introduction. And the philosophy we have is make it easy for the FDA reviewer to understand, make it very clear the security that you have. We think that leads to the best results, the fastest review, the least amount of questions from the FDA. So what we put in here into this introduction is just an introduction to the device. In this case, we are following the MITRE playbook for threat modeling medical devices, which you can actually find online. And it is a vital signs monitor that's worn on the ankle as the device. And the physician is going to look at the data over a number of months to determine if the patient is at risk of stroke. That's important because it limits the level of safety risk. And we wanted to highlight that here. The impact of patient safety in this case can never be very high because it is kind of like an offline, sort of thing. And it's not immediately critical to the patient safety. We provide the threat surface. So these are all the kind of entry points, to the system, and we'll go over that in a minute. We list all of the security controls here that we actually are going to have in the device. And they're organized by the 8 security categories in Appendix 1 of the guidance. And I think that the FDA reviewer has it in their mind that they're looking to see if all these categories have some level of security controls associated with them. I would say the reason that they generally do this is these are kind of common categories that you would almost see needed in almost every every device, you still want to go back to your threat and risk assessment and, the risks levels that you have, the highs and some of the mediums. You want to make sure that those are actually addressed with those risks are mitigated with security controls. But I still think too that if you're getting something in all the categories, I think that does help in terms of the submission and then getting an FDA reviewer on board that you've actually implemented enough security. If you go into that Appendix 1, like we said, there's 8 cybersecurity categories, but then there's 85 subcontrols. If you actually go in and if you counted all of kind of the next level of detail of what's recommended in each of those 8 categories, we've listed here by category the subcontrols that we've implemented. This isn't all 85 controls. These are the controls that actually came out of the threat and risk assessment that we felt were needed to actually mitigate the risks identified. The final thing here that we include in this introduction is the software update process. We refer to the fact that we do have a patchability diagram, coming up, and we'll go over that. And we have here just a quick description saying that the software updates for the device actually come through the app from the phone store. And the update to the device itself is received from the app that's running on the patient's phone over Bluetooth. So we kind of just explained very simply what the path is, again, just to give the FDA reviewer a little bit of context and a little bit of understanding how that's going to work. And then when we get to the patchability, updatability diagram, we get into more detail. Okay, so here's the system. We have the medical IoT device. This again is worn on the person's ankle. It's a small device. It has a microcontroller in it. It would be running, an operating system like FreeRTOS or Zephyr. It uses Bluetooth to connect to the patient's cell phone where it's running an app from the company that made the SAMPS, again, a fictional device, and actually loaded it onto the cell phone. It connects to the cloud over a wide area network, so cell phone or Wi-Fi. So there's an interface to the cloud where the data is uploaded for processing. And then the clinician has another path into the cloud where they can go and actually see the results from the processing of the data that was uploaded from the patient. And then the final thing that we show in this global system view is the update path from the company that is making the device, the app, the cloud services. They update through the phone store to the AMPS device, to the app, and then the app actually updates the AMPS device here. You want to show in this global system view all the security assets. That's what we try to do. Like Milton was talking about, we think like a top-down and bottom-up approach to threat modeling and risk assessment is good. Drawing kind of a diagram that has all of the paths of possible compromise in it, I think is good, which is kind of a nice traditional approach. But then also you need the bottom-up where you're identifying all these assets. And I think when we did it for this device, we had something like 26 assets or so that we identified, which are all represented on the diagram here. There might actually be more. Maybe it's over 30. So here are the paths. And like Milton was explaining, the FDA wants to see that there is security on all these network connections. And so in the global system view, we just try to make it simple and show that all these network connections are secure. So we go right at it and we say for the Bluetooth, we've got authentication and encryption. We're using something that a security mode 1, level 4 for that's part of BLE, which provides very good security. Then after this, you're going to see that TLS 1.3 is the workhorse for the rest of the interfaces here. It just happens that if you're using iOS and Apple, Apple uses TLS 1.3 for the connection to their app store. And then when they're updating an app on the phone, they use TLS so that's 2 and 3. Number 4 is a interface from the device to the cloud. And you'll see it's very common for cloud talking to an app, that interface to use TLS 1.3. And then it's TLS 1.3 is used in web browsers. And this is the interface that the clinician is using. They'll all have different keys, for these different interfaces, even though they're all using the same basic library of security. And one nice thing about TLS 1.3, it uses this AEAD ciphers, which is a encryption mechanism that includes message authentication codes. So basically, it's not only providing encryption, it's also authenticating every single packet of data or every single piece of data that's being sent to the device. So it is a very secure interface when you're using TLS 1.3. Okay, we'll go to the second view now, which is the patchability view. And we're addressing Category 8. And there's only one in Category 8, which is to deliver updates over authenticated and integrity-generated channels. And what we'll show here is the three different locations that a software update is going to kind of be generated or stop along the way on. You've got the company where the software update is generated. You've got the smartphone company, let's say Apple, where the update for the app is going to go, and it's going to be distributed from the App Store to the patient's home, where the patient's phone is obviously located. And then you're going to have the actual, again, IoT embedded medical device worn on the ankle, and that also is going to be in the patient's home. The notes that we put in here are for just kind of giving, I think, background on the security being used, again, to show that each step along the way, that the security is solid. And I would say this is all kind of expected sorts of security that you would need in this sort of scenario that we're describing here. And so if we go through it step by step, so you've got the internet connections here. Those blue clouds are untrusted, so we need to have protection over those connections. And if we go through step by step, we have step one, which is the company actually acquires a distribution certificate from the App Store, let's say from Apple, for example, and then they're going to store that securely. So in software updates, the FDA does want to know that your process for development does include secure storage and role-based access control to those keys. In other words, that there's only a limited number of people that will have access to those keys that are used for signing the software. So we're saying only accessible by authorized users. In this storage, it has that distribution certificate, again, that's used to sign the app code so that it can be validated as being authentic and has integrity. And we're using SHA-256 and RSA. Again, this is what, this is actually for the AMPS device that we're going to use that for the distribution here, and actually also for the phone app itself. And we're also highlighting here the 8 categories, so it's clear to the reviewer where or which places these categories, again, in Appendix 1, are being kind of covered. So again, referring back to that Appendix 1. Step 2 is you're going to sign the software, and there's 2 types of software here. There's the actual app that's going to run on the phone, and then the app is going to push the software down to the device. You're going to sign them both. You're going to use different keys to sign them. The app signature key is the one that comes from the smartphone company. The key used to sign the firmware that's going to go on the device is one that the company is going to generate. A corresponding key is going to be installed at manufacturing time. It's a very common approach to have a key installed here so that the software downloaded can be authenticated on the device. So that's the way we're managing keys. So we're talking a little bit about how are we managing keys securely on the device. The AMPS device, I mean. Step 3 is the software is made on the App Store, so we're getting ready to distribute the software. Step 4 is that the software is going to get distributed. Again, we're going over a unsecured channel here. And again, we're highlighting the cryptography being used, which of the 8 security categories that are being covered by the security that's being used in this step. Again, you kind of get this for free because you're using the Apple App Store, for example, and this is the security that they mandate. So that's pretty good and easy, and it's very secure. And then it's going to step 5, which is the patient's phone is going to check for the signature on the app software that's being loaded. And actually, every time an app is launched by an iOS phone, the signature is being checked. So again, you're getting that for free because of the way that Apple does security. If you're using Android, it's a little different, and you'd want to just understand, how Android does it. But that is also a very secure process that you kind of get for free. And then we're listing again, referencing the 8 categories. And finally, step 6 is the app is going to push the firmware over Bluetooth down to the AMPS device itself. The AMPS device is actually going to check the signature. It's going to authenticate, that it's coming from a valid source, and it's going to check the integrity of the software that's being downloaded. And there we're using authentication encryption. Again, the category 1 security categories, and we're mentioning the cryptography being used. Mode 1, level 4 makes it clear how that's actually being done. So this is the patchability view. Sorry for a lot of detail in a short amount of time. We're certainly happy to answer questions at the end about this, and even over email afterwards. One last thing I forgot to mention is you do want to track the phones that got updated. And that is what this is showing. It's a separate path. It's a path you'd have to set up yourself, where it's a telemetry log of data to make sure that you know which devices have been updated. And for your cybersecurity plan, the FDA is expecting that you'll keep metrics of how quickly you can update devices and what percentage of devices are being updated. And you're going to want to ideally do this through an automated way. And this would be a way of doing that, which is keeping a log of which devices actually received the software updates. Okay. Moving on to the next architecture view. So this is number 3 now. This is a multi-patient harm view. And like Milton explained, this is a view where the FDA wants to see, have you really limited the risk that a lot of patients could be have their safety compromised or their information stolen by a single attack. And in this case, we're showing a particular possible case of compromise where the AI model is having its weights modified. This is called poisoning. And it's a kind of a bit of a nefarious attack because it's hard to detect. Sometimes the model may look like it's operating correctly, but if the weights have been modified, maybe it isn't operating correctly all the time. And given that it's in the cloud, we have this potential, this is where the AI engine is, of having wrong results sent for a large number of patients. So this is the multi-patient harm example we're going to show here. It relates back to the threat model, to this threat right here, which we identified again in the very beginning of the threat modeling process. And this is one case out of many. I think you'd need probably 3 other multi-patient harm view because we have a cloud, because we have an app, because we have a Bluetooth device, and then we have the update process, and we have the clinician computer also. All of those things could potentially be sources for multi-patient harm, by coming back somehow to the cloud and then having results distributed that are incorrect. And if you can fit all the cases onto one slide, I think that's certainly acceptable. In this case, we found that it was just complicated enough to have one case of multi-patient harm. I usually expect when I'm doing these architectural diagrams to have multiple diagrams under multi-patient harm. And it's not a ton of work, but and I think it is something that the FDA does appreciate. Step one is where the compromise would happen. And what we're saying is that the credentials from the developer are actually compromised. And so we're way back in the development pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline, where there's a compromise to the model weights. So it's even before it's been distributed to the cloud, where the AI engine processes the vital signs from the patient. Step two is that it's this compromised set of weights for the AI model is uploaded. And since it's coming from the CI/CD engine, it actually has kind of a version tag and signing that's probably correct. It's distributed into production. So now it's part of the product, so to speak, with step three. And step four is that the backend services now are distributing bad results because the model weights have been changed, and it's distributing bad results to multiple clinicians, and it's distributing bad results to multiple patients. So it's really kind of an example of multi-patient harm. And you can start to see the security controls that we have in place. And the best security control that we have here is multi-factor authentication, so that the initial compromise where a phishing attack got the credentials from the developer, with multi-factor authentication, that actually is a significant way to reduce that risk of there being a credential compromise. And then we like to put the other controls that we have in place here so that the FDA knows that for multi-patient harm, we've got defense in depth, and we have controls in the patient's cell phone. We have other controls in the cloud, that would help mitigate this risk. And I think if you look at these controls, we're relating them back again to the 8 categories, and we've referenced them against the 85 subcontrols that are in there. So it's very clear that in all areas we have levels of defense in depth, multiple controls to help with this sort of multi-patient harm attack here. Okay, so the next one we're going to take a look at, and I'm just taking a look at the time here, is the use case view. And this is the final one. This is the 4th view, an example that we have. You can see here we're using essentially the main parts from the global system view again. And we're showing one use case out of multiple. I usually find that there's more use case architectural diagrams than there are multi-patient harm diagrams. So I'm usually expecting 2 or 3 or 4. And this is related to every kind of mode that your medical device would have. So the mode we're showing here is, in a second, is that the data is being transmitted from the AMPS device back up to the cloud. So that would be one mode, one kind of operation of the device. You'd have another. You could show potentially that the device is secure when it's gathering vital signs from the patient. You'd have another use case where the clinician is pulling data from the cloud that you might want to show that this use case is secure, and so on. So you might on your device have a mode where you have an HDO personnel that are changing the modes on a device, and that would be a use case you'd want to show, because you'd have certain privilege access for a device to be able to change configurations on the device. So those are just some examples of the multiple types of use cases that you might want to show. And then what we're showing here is, as we go through the steps, here where we're doing actually a little bit more detail of showing the threat versus the controls. And if you just remember this for the next slide, threat 7, threat 5, and these controls, I'm going to just show you a quick snip of the threat model and show you how we actually, in the threat model spreadsheet, connect the mitigations to the risk, the security controls, all the way back to the beginning to the threats. And in this case, we're showing step by step, how we're securing the device in this use case. So, for instance, this one here, denial of service by draining a battery, or jamming BLE. This is kind of an attack that actually had been demonstrated previously, and we're showing how we mitigate that risk by, validating messages in range, handling denial of service conditions, and then if we're getting kind of a large volume of traffic or noise, that we've developed our Bluetooth stack so that it's going to ignore that noise and not always turn on that RF beacon that would drain the battery in the device. Step 2 is the phone sends the data up to the cloud, which you can see here. And then here are the security controls that we have associated with sending the data up to the cloud. Step 3 is that the cloud is going to process the data. And we have these security controls associated with, the data coming into the cloud and the actual operation of the cloud here. And then step 4 is that the AI engine is going to analyze the data. And here's the security controls that we have associated with that step. So again, along the way, we want to show for this use case that we have defense in depth. And I think we've done a pretty good job here in terms of identifying security controls that are going to mitigate these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threats that we've identified on for this particular security view. Just quickly, we generated the threat and risk assessment using our automation tool. I had referred to this earlier. It's called ITHRA. It's a tool that does threat and risk analysis. We find it extremely valuable because there's no training, and find that it reduces the amount of work to create a threat and risk assessment by about 10x. And here's an excerpt from the AMPS threat and risk assessment. We were able to do a full threat and risk assessment for this fictional device because the tool made it actually very time efficient to do so. And it became, I think, a great example over these series of webinars. Here's the end. And if you remember, I referred to these couple of threats in the previous diagram. Here are the security controls that would be at the end. Here are the attack paths associated with those security controls. So we're tracing back all the way to the threats. So for these assets, when we started the threat and risk assessment, these are the threats we had associated with these assets. Here's the attack paths that we looked at the exploitability for. And then here are the security controls that we came up with to reduce those risks. So again, just showing how we have traceability in this method for the architectural views that we're showing here. Milton, did you want to talk to this slide? And I think I'm going to continue to share, right?
Yeah. So before I speak to this, so Colin, superb example. I can say that, before this webinar, I haven't seen anything that explicit on how to deliver these views. So, awesome job, great detail. If you were stuck on how to create these views, this slide is sort of a snapshot. This is, of, okay, here's how you get started turning the crank in a simplified way. Basically, create a threat model, and you can. An initial starting point for creating a threat model is to assume that your system is unprotected. The reason you do that is so that the risks you discover and the solutions you choose will have an anchoring in terms of your analysis. You know why they're there. You know why they can't be removed. if you're not familiar with threat models, then consider using tools like ITHRA. There are other ones out there as well, but consider using a tool because this is kind of a specialized function that you want to have a methodology brought into by the tool. Create a risk analysis. Consider buying templates or using tools again. You create controls, and basically you just assess and repeat until your risks are below your threshold. And then number one and number two, really create the ingredients that you need for your diagrams. So they give you your asset list, your connectivity, the modes, the cybersecurity controls. So then in terms of diagramming, frankly, it can be, the simplest open source drawing tools that you want, or, something else. But do you consider specialty tools used for diagramming this thing in particular? A popular one that's out there is Microsoft Threat Modeling Tool. And then in terms of, say, the actual diagrams, the global system view, you're taking all assets, all modes, and all phases, and throwing that into one comprehensive view. The multi-patient harm and updatability, these are almost kind of like special case views. The multi-patient harm may or may not apply if there isn't anything, if your devices are really isolated and there isn't anything that touches all of them. The updatability, patchability view is for all firmware and software updates. And then lastly, your security use case views, as Colin mentioned. And to me, this is really how your security measures go into action when attacked. So if you're looking for a simplified, here's how you get started, this is the snapshot, this is how the crank is turned in a simplified form.
Okay, great. Back to the poll question again. And we'll compare how we did in the beginning. So if, Rachel, if you don't mind running the poll again. And how confident are you that the medical device processes will result in meeting FDA expectations? I have the previous poll results here, so we'll compare. We'll give Milton and I a grade about how we did today. And there's a number of questions. So I'm starting to answer them in the chat, but then we'll also answer them live here. And we'll definitely go over, if people want to stick around, we'll continue to answer them as we go. And you could potentially watch them in the recording if you have to drop off here. So, okay, great. And then Rachel, if you don't mind. All right. Thank you. That's perfect. I'm just going to snip that quickly. Okay. So let's see here. I just put them here in an email so we could see very roughly. Side by side. Can you see that, Milton, the two, or is that too small?
Yeah, you might want to go full screen with that. And maybe zoom in.
How's that?
That's legible.
Okay. So yeah, we got people out of the not confident category a little bit. Slightly confident went up, but maybe that's because people are moving over. Extremely confident went down, so that's not great. But I think the confident category is the same. And
Colin,
let me look at the percentages. Sorry.
I'm not sure if the one on the right is the most recent one. Is that correct?
Oh, did I not get the final version?
Well, no, I think you have the final version there.
The one on the right-hand side, poll 2, is the most recent one. So that's what folks just did.
Right.
Okay.
So for example, extremely confident went up by 2 points.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the numbers. That's the wrong thing to do, Milton. Yeah, so the percentages is better. You're right. So the percentage here is higher, so extremely confident. Confident went up, so I think that's good. So I think that's kind of clear indicators that we did okay here. And then the somewhat confident went down, and I don't know if that's because people moved over, but we did reduce not confident, and I think you have kind of just it's a little hard to interpret, but you have people moving into the slightly confident category. So I'm going to say, Milton, we did okay if we want to declare victory here. So
I'm going to go along with any declaration of victory because, I should. And I think it's incredibly brave that, you put the test this with this title loop, closing the loop is really brave in front of, live and everything. So
yeah. And we'll get to the questions in a second, but just quickly, here's where we were last year. So we had like 15% in the not confident categories versus 5 now. So I think the industry, again, this is very broad. It's not necessarily exactly statistically significant by any means. But we could see that the not confident category is lower, which is great. Extremely confident is about the same, which is interesting. Uh, Confident is a little bit higher now. We have 34, but I'm sure that's within the error here. And then the somewhat confident, the middle level was 42. So that's gone up significantly. So that's probably pretty good. And the slightly confident category was close to 25. It's down to 14. So I would say that this is indicative of the industry overall coming to terms with the FDA guidance. And I mean, the guidance only came out originally in September 2023. So last year, it wasn't long after that. And I think we see people coming to terms with the guidance here, which is great. So it's good to see. We got some upcoming events. We're going to be at Embedded World. If you want to meet us there, presenting a paper on the EU Cyber Resilience Act. If you have if you have products that aren't categorized as medical devices, but you sell them along with your medical devices, whether they're software and embedded devices, the EU Cyber Resilience Act is something you should consider. And we'll do our next webinar based on that. Um, we're also defining the next product. And if you have input, we'd love to hear it. We're trying to hear about the most difficult problems that you have with preparing your FDA submissions. We're trying to automate as much of that as possible, including, considering automating these diagrams, potentially the generation of them and the automation of documentation. We'll send a follow-up email on that one. And then we'll get into the Q&A, Milton. And we'll keep going here until either Janelle or Rachel tell us to stop. I started writing out a question here for one of them, which was a good question, which was, could you speak to the need to assess not only external communication interfaces, but also internal interfaces for complex systems, diverse subsystems, and data sharing needs? What you'll need to do in the beginning is create trust boundaries in your device. And it doesn't only have to be at a network interface level. Anything within a trust boundary, you should have confidence that those things are trusted, those assets that are within that boundary. But it could be everything, connected to a local area network might not be trusted, or everything behind a firewall might not be trusted. And so you'd want to go and look at those trust boundaries. And it is, very common, to have, interfaces that are looked at or subsystems that are looked at as untrusted.
And if I can add on to that, because I also started answering that question, and I completely agree with what you said, Colin. I also wanted to throw out that your trust boundaries could be particularly where the device is in the field and not necessarily in a controlled environment, your housings or boards. So it's basically accessibility to the communications, whether they're behind a housing and a few screws, or whether they're leads even on a board that are accessible. That those are what I want to say, different levels of trust within the system.
That's great, Milton. Thank you. Perfect. Next one we have here is TLS 1.3 standard in modern web browsers and SaaS providers. Who dictates TLS 1.3 or 1.2? Can the medical device manufacturer control this, or are they at mercy of the network providers or other organizations? You can actually create browser software yourself. You can control that browser software using various frameworks and stacks. And I think that you can dictate, when you're using that, what sort of TLS is being used. And the more modern TLS, the better. But if you were using kind of a standard network, like again, the Apple network, they're going to have security dictated, and in that case, you wouldn't be able to control it. So it depends a little bit. And then if you're using SaaS software, I think you're going to be a little bit at the mercy of the SaaS providers, but they're usually pretty good if they're big companies. They would have done a thorough threat and risk assessment, and I think would be using kind of the latest TLS, would be my view on this. There's some nuance here I'd have to do some research on and happy to talk about. I don't know exactly how, if you were using kind of a browser framework as part of your product and you were installing that on the customer system, how that would the TLS would be controlled, but it's certainly possible to do. Milton, do you have any comments on that one?
No, that's I think you covered it well.
Great. Milton, is there another one here you want to take? What?
I was just I had made it to the TLS one, and I haven't made it beyond that. So,
Oh, okay. Let's see. We'll go in order here. Does this apply to a standalone application which is not cloud-based? Yeah, I would. If it's SAMD, software as a medical device, you absolutely could, use these architectural views. I think they all potentially would apply. You might not have a multi-patient harm view. I'd have to think about that. If it was somehow you were running on a somebody else's PC, for example, which is a case you might install on somebody else's PC, but it would absolutely apply to SAMD, and for SAMD submissions, the FDA would expect the architectural views. Do you have any comments there, Milton?
I mean, yeah. To the question, I guess I thought that the principles that we were using, I thought they would apply to SAMD or software in a medical device as well as cloud-based. That it didn't really matter the type of communication, where it was located. That's all part of your your overview, if nothing else. And each communication link would undergo the same sort of process. So that was my initial thought.
Okay, great. Great. Let's see. I lost a little track where we were here.
We were up to, in the last path, where your tracking devices have been updated, which have been updated. What type of identifying information are you storing? Device ID, time and date. So I'm not sure where that was in your.
Oh, yeah. I think this is related to the cybersecurity management plan submission for eStar. And I think it was on the slide for patchability update views. And I think you want the metrics that the FDA calls out in the guidance is how long to patch a vulnerability after you know about it, I think is one of the metrics. What percentage of devices have been patched, and how long does it take you to patch that percentage? So those are, I think, the three metrics that you want. So you want to store device ID, you want to store time and date, and then you want to be able to have the information referencing when you actually started the whole process, if it is in response to a vulnerability, so you can keep those metrics up to date. And that's outlined very clearly in the guidance, that there's those three metrics. The FDA kind of hints that they may want additional metrics in the future. They've clearly said they have the right to update the guidance as they go. But those are the three that when we talk to people, we have them work on.
I might say you have time for probably one more, because it does look like there's quite a number of questions in here. But perhaps we could do just one more question, and then for everyone else, obviously the gents can review questions and get back to you post webinar.
Milton, do you want to pick one here?
I was just looking at this one. Could you elaborate on how the security architecture views relate to or incorporates threat modeling and also risk assessment. My initial thought there was just that the architecture views were really dependent upon the scope of threat modeling and risk assessment, and they're sort of the basis of that to receive the information coming from those. So do you have thoughts on that, Colin?
I think that's it, Milton. I think it is. Like you said it in the beginning, right? That the architecture views are going to come directly from the threat and risk assessment that you create. And that, the assets right from the beginning is what you want to put into the architectural views. And that is actually the first step in the threat and risk assessment process when you're coming from the kind of the bottoms up perspective, like you've described.
Right.
Well, I will just say, I think it speaks to the outstanding quality of the webinar that you all just put on, that 75 people have stayed with you 15 minutes over to get more information. And obviously that is just outstanding. So well done, Milton, Colin. Thank you so much for this incredible information. I will say my head is spinning and I'm not even in this space, directly in this space. I love stuff like this, but it's definitely got me thinking. But for all of you still with us, we will make sure that we send out the recording of this so you can review. Obviously, the slides just had the contact information and QR codes so that you can connect with these folks. I absolutely suggest you reach out because obviously there's an incredible breadth of information here. So thank you, everyone, for sticking with us and joining us for this. And thank you, Colin and Milton, for an incredible presentation. We hope to see you again soon at another Mass Medic webinar, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.